Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to actually do the entirety of the show on the issue of misinformation, how it's created by our enemies, how it is spread, and in many cases, how our side, our news sources, and individuals across the board, from very prominent ones to ordinary people, spread enemy misinformation everywhere on social media. You know, all of our news sites and social media sites actually are obsessed with translating everything that the Baku regime managed to post or pay some reporter to put up in some Western or Israeli newspaper. Every threat made by Ilham Aliyev, every idiotic tweet by some so-called member of the parliament is given, great significance, no matter how inconsequential the person is or what they said, and somehow becomes breaking news across all of our media sources. So what we wanted to do is actually take an example of this to sort of highlight how this is done and how it's disseminated and how it is used against us. And what we're going to focus on is the recent Steve Witkoff visit to Baku. Steve Witkoff is the personal envoy of President Donald Trump. After his visit to negotiate with Russian President Vladimir Putin, made a special visit to Baku. In truth, no one really knows why Mr. Witkoff went to Baku. He could have gone there to urge them to sign the peace agreement. He could have talked about a gas pipeline through Central Asia. He could have talked about Iran. In reality, nobody knows. But as soon as this news was outed, the state propaganda machine and their proxies in the West for the regime in Baku made this into some groundbreaking event. That is something that is focused on bringing Azerbaijan into the Abrahamic Accords, and this was supposedly prompted by a letter by 300 prominent rabbis. Let me explain what the Abrahamic Accords are and how it actually fits or doesn't fit in this case. Abrahamic Accords is an initiative by the first Trump administration to essentially incentivize Arab countries that had no relationships with Israel to establish relationships with Israel. So on the face of it, Azerbaijan cannot be part of the Abrahamic Accords. First of all, because they're not an Arab country. And second of all, because they already have very long, deep relationships with Israel. So there's this whole notion of them being added to this concept is utter and complete nonsense. Behind all of the lies and propaganda on this front, there actually is a program and a desire by the Aliyev regime, and their play and their calculation has always been, once Donald Trump becomes president, they can use the good offices of Israel to be able to get a carte blanche to do what they want in Armenia, to use the great lobbying network that Israel has in Washington, D.C., like organizations like AIPAC and others.
Mr. Sharifov, the minister, comes with a letter of greeting, a historic letter to the AIPAC Policy Conference from Azerbaijan's first vice president, Her Excellency, Mrs. Mehriban Aliyeva. Mrs. Aliyeva is a respected female leader in the Muslim world and globally, promoting education, tolerance, and the advancement of women. We are honored to receive greetings from the good friend of the Jewish people, the first vice president of Azerbaijan.
All of this is also being pushed both in media, from prominent ones to marginal ones, most of them out of Israel, out of the Jerusalem Post. Now let's focus on the Jerusalem Post, because almost all the pro-Israeli propaganda in Israel comes out of there. And there's an assumption that if a newspaper is Israeli, it's somehow a serious publication. There are actually very good newspapers in Israel, for example, Haaretz being the best of them. But the Jerusalem Post, it actually isn't one of them. For anybody who works in public relations internationally, everybody knows that for a couple of $1,000s, you can actually get anything published in the Jerusalem Post or posted, no matter how rubbish it is. If you want to fully comprehend the depravity of this news source, more specifically, the people that are actually willing to be bought and paid for by the regime in Baku, I'm going to bring up the example of a single individual that actually writes most of these pro-Azeri articles in the Jerusalem Post. It's a gentleman named Mordecai Kadar, who is most famous for going on Israeli television to advocate for the rape of the families of Palestinian prisoners. A person so degenerate that when he had speaking engagements scheduled in Europe, Jewish organizations threatened to picket them to prevent them from happening. To put it in a very Armenian context. If Dog was an Israeli newspaper, he would be the Jerusalem Post. Now let's move on to the often referred to this 300 rabbis letter that supposedly is demanding some kind of an alliance between the United States, Israel, and Azerbaijan. This is actually not the first time these people have been activated. During the ethnic cleansing in September of 23, they were also activated. Now, what we want to know is who actually these people are. Because of my own work in the United States as a political consultant, I work with many communities that have a large number of Jewish residents, and I've actually dealt with many prominent rabbis. Most of them from mainstream Judaism are exceptionally sophisticated and worldly figures and are not that easy to corral for cheap games for some second-rate regime. If you look through the list of these supposed 300 rabbis, the overwhelming majority come out of the ranks of the ultra-Orthodox and Hasidic Jewish communities, most of whom, frankly, have almost no formal educations outside of their religious studies, and of whom almost no one has ever heard of. Most of whom, if I would guess, would not be able to find Armenia or Azerbaijan on the map. And they were probably asked to sign this letter by one or two of their supervisors, who are very likely on the payroll of the regime in Baku. Now, what was the reaction to all of this from our end? Like Pavlov's dogs, all of the Armenian publications across the world in Armenia and in diaspora took this and ran with it as it is some kind of gospel and not enemy propaganda. Many people who I have a great deal of respect for actually sent this as a topic of concern, which I totally understand because, there's actually underlying reasons. The reality is that the Israeli relationship has done serious damage to Armenia. But by not looking critically and asking questions, more importantly, understanding the broader, political play here, we're actually doing the enemy's work for them. Now, how do we deal with all this? I think, obviously, the first answer is media literacy. But frankly, that is a long-term project. And in truth, I've never really seen it done well anywhere in the world, even in countries far more advanced or sophisticated than Armenia. But what I think we should do is it all starts with what I call a negative filter. That means that you have to assume that every word uttered by the leader of the enemy country and his proxies or the people working for him abroad is a lie until it is proven by multiple credible sources. Any news source in his country or outside of it that puts his country in a good light should be assumed to be one of two things: a lie, or that media source is bought and paid for, especially if that article raises the relevance or importance of that country to the world. The counter to this is whenever there's a negative story about the enemy country, true or not, it should be spread immediately, especially if it attacks and humiliates the leader and his family. In truth, we are in a 20-year war with the enemy. Anybody who speaks of peace at this point is preaching a false gospel. Information warfare is a central part of the decades-long war to come with our enemies. And in that, everyone with a laptop is a soldier. Our marching order is to educate when we can and manipulate when we have to. In conclusion, we're actually going to close with an interesting note. A few days ago, speaking of information warfare, Azeri social media sites accused Armenians of sending special forces cats carrying very mean notes to attack one of their military positions. Since there are no actual cameras in all of our positions around the border, we actually have live footage of this showdown. Please watch.
Now this is your last chance. I've been more than reasonable. If you do not agree to my commands, then I shall... Jesus Christ! Right. Charge!
You know, right before the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh in September 23, the same Azeri social media sites were accusing Armenian dogs of attacking their positions and laying mines all over the place. So this accusation coming at this time means one of two things. One is that there's actually an attack coming in Armenia. Or secondly, that our dogs and cats have more balls than most of our leaders. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Insights.